really what we wanted was a soundtrack that was a bedtime story. My daughter, Harper, wants a dad that sings her a lullaby.
I feel like when you listen to this 10 years from now, you will remember humming that into your phone. That moment when Harper was 2 years old.
This is more composer-centric and less Dulcimer, virtuosic kind of stuff. It's really about, can we collectively use sound together to tell a story?
There's a lot of information that can be portrayed in music. Some of it's not necessary. Take some notes out, distill it down to just what it needs to be.
How can we take the simple and make it memorable? Well, hello there. I'm Joshua Messick, and I am so excited to be here with my friend Eric Hillman, and we have completed a new album called To Meadowrest. And we would just like to talk about that, share with you some of the inside detailed process of how we made it, all those cool little things that went into the process. But for starters, I'd like to talk about how we met. So Eric was recording a soundtrack and needed a Dulcimer player.
I needed this.
Yeah.
I needed a Dulcimer. Yeah, I was recording a video game soundtrack. This was several years ago. I mean, 2019 maybe, 2020, around there, somewhere in there, for a game called Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn. And I wanted to feature an instrument specifically for these little social hubs, these little coffee shops in the game. I wanted to feature an instrument that was acoustic and a little bit unknown and old and a little bit rickety. So I, after looking around, I found the hammered dulcimer, and I was like, well, this might be really nice. And I went to YouTube, typed in hammered dulcimer. This guy's face pops up. Your face pops up. And just immediately I was like, oh, well, this is the guy. I got to reach out to this guy. It seems like just watching your performance videos and like the command of the instrument and how much passion you had in it. I was like, okay, this is going to be right. So yeah, I just reached out and emailed you, and
I think I was actually camping when I got the email.
Yeah. Fortunately, fortunately you emailed right back, and I think from our very first conversation, it was apparent like, oh, this is going to be really great. This is going to be really excellent. And I think how I knew that was you were just so open, and you were open and willing to work in non-traditional ways, I guess, for the instrument. And you were also a composer and arranger as well, which is really helpful, especially when you're wanting to do a few things that are a little bit off the beaten path for an instrument, knowing that you were there to help, translate what I wanted to do into the instrument, but do it in a way that wasn't just, what an instrumentalist would do, but someone who had a really deep knowledge of the instrument. I sort of settled it right there as soon as we started talking about it. It was like, and then we were off to the races. Yeah, so it had been a bit since we had worked on the soundtrack. The game had come out, and you had made your Wonderscape album in between here.
I think we stayed in touch every now and then.
Every now and then,
text
sure.
And socials.
Yeah. And I remember it was early last year. Yeah. I gave you a call, and on that phone call, you said, "I've been wanting to do a thing. Yeah. I've been thinking about music, like sleep music, rest music, doing something with the dulcimer." Which is, again, it's such a great instrument to work with because it's generally underrepresented everywhere. And because we experimented so much on the Flintlock soundtrack, I think that, I think your brain was probably just going with possibilities of what else to do next. Yeah. And we started thinking and conceptualizing about the idea of what a hammered dulcimer album of like ambient restful music would sound like.
So I remember when we had this conversation, I said the beautiful thing about this collaboration is this allows me to do what I do best. It allows you to do what you do best. We don't have to change anything about who we are. We just have to do our thing and figure out a little bit of direction, but we just create awesome music together. I remember saying, Eric, why don't you just fly out to my studio and come here and we'll just knock this album out in a couple days? Because at the time I was like, ambient music like this, it's just so easy to make. All we have to do is play a few notes here and a few notes there and it'll be done. And Eric, there's just like this pause on the other end of the phone. And it's just like, yeah, well, let's put that on the back burner and just process things for a while. And I was like, okay. And, in that process, Eric was like, I don't really want to make spa music, which is kind of what I had in my mind at the time. And really digging into that, you were started laying more into this world that you wanted to create, to where there was actually a lot of thought, a lot of detail within this world. And that's when I think we discovered that really what we wanted was a soundtrack that was a bedtime story. With that, I understood that this was actually going to take a lot more work than just improvising in the studio. There was so much more depth there. And I loved that because that allowed me to lay into being more of a composer and less of an improviser, which I love improvising as well. I think it's awesome. But to create a world that has themes, that actually has a direction, that is actually telling a narrative, well, it just takes more time and more work. And so I think that our skill sets on the soundtrack work that we've done were really complementary to be able to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think in a lot of people's mind, simple is equivalent to easy when it comes to music. But for me, I think that there is a lot of complexity in the process of making something that sounds simple, right? Something that is minimal, but carefully crafted. A lot of my work process that I really, really enjoy is editing down. I think a lot of times there's a lot of information that can be portrayed in music, but it's almost more, just a lot of it, some of it's not necessary. We take some notes out, take some sounds out, take some things out and distill it down to just what it needs to be. A lot of ambient music gets sort of tossed to the wayside as spa music or just background sound, just a pad held for 12 minutes. And I knew that one of the things that was going to help this process was, one, the hammered dulcimer itself. As you say, it doesn't really lend itself directly to, you're plucking strings. It's percussive. It is, it doesn't lend itself to just a wash of sound. And I didn't want to do that. As generally what I want to do is I want to create these little detailed worlds, even if they're simple. And it sort of forced us to keep the composition incredibly simple, and but then focus a lot on the details of the design, the sound design, the way that we were using the instrument in a sparse way, but not in a way that it just fell away to the background and wasn't even a part of the project at all. I think we had a lot of back and forth especially at the beginning, figuring out how do we encircle the hammered dulcimer so that it's still a feature. It doesn't disappear.
So I really feel like in many ways this is kind of like my first project to where this is more composer centric and less dulcimer virtuosic kind of stuff. I mean, it's really about, can we collectively use sound together to tell a story? And part of the drive of what keeps me going forward is discovering new ways to use this instrument. And being involved in this process has given me so much life, so much joy in just composing. And it's been immensely enjoyable. I hope that listeners, when they listen to this, aren't just trying to hear a dulcimer. In fact, if they're doing that, I think that they're going to miss out on its intent. I think what I hope is that collectively they listen to our hearts and they're drawn to a place where their mind and life can find a moment of rest. Through this journey, I learned a valuable lesson, that is, how can we take the simple and make it memorable? And I remember just hours that I would like sing these notes over in my head, or, take a shower or whatever, and just think and process, okay, what can I do here to shape these few notes and these phrases to where it's actually telling the story and guiding people into that state of rest.
Music has the ability to be a presentation of a very specific moment in time, especially when you're recording. Or if you are performing, you're performing right in that moment. And whoever's there, it gets to experience that moment in real time. I really wanted it to still feel like you were there with Josh playing, and that you were moving through like taking a hike where there's wind noise and there's the creaking of the trees and there's the birds in the distance and all this stuff that kind of makes life worth hearing. I like to have that in the music as well, not necessarily bringing in those sounds, but I think in the physicality of the instrument and the physicality of just making music in a space.
On those lines, like, I've never, ever one time had a person after the concert come up to me and say, Josh, I was so moved by your music because you played perfectly. Mm-hmm. In part because I always make mistakes at my concerts. Also in part because the reality is the absence of mistakes is not what draws the human heart into the music. Yes, there are times that mistakes can be distracting. And I think even with your recording ethos, you would totally agree that, okay, sometimes we need to take another take. But the reality is that the story, the human emotion, being immersed in the music to where literally you can feel yourself becoming the music. And in that moment in time, you are transported into a different world. There are times when I'm playing and I'm in the right place where I need to be, where I don't even know where I am.
Right.
I literally, in that moment in time, I am the music. Mm-hmm. And that is what people respond to. And I think that's in line with what you're saying when you're producing this kind of music. You're more interested in what are we saying with the music? What is the story that it's telling, rather than, a little blemish here and there. And I think that is so relatable because the human experience, we are not perfect. We're just not. Humans do not in music. It's kind of an interesting fact. When things are so perfect and quantized and AI driven, we don't like it. We just don't want to listen to it. And the reality is we respond to those little minor imperfections. That's actually what invites us in and what draws us in.
On that note, I'd love to highlight a certain moment in our process of making this record.
I think I know where you're headed.
Yeah. Do you want to tell the story of the humming?
Yeah, the humming. Yeah, that's it. So I'd composed this lullaby for Harper, and you had this idea of me actually humming.
I think you had the idea.
Did I have the idea?
I think you did. You had the idea, and you sent me just a
voice memo.
A voice memo.
Maybe I asked you to hum it. I think that's what it was, because you're a singer. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yes, and you sent me you humming it onto your phone as like here's an idea. What do you think of getting someone to hum this, or you humming it? And I put it immediately into the piece and sent the piece back to you. And I remember you gave me a call. You were like, no, I didn't want this. I can't. What did you call me? What did you say to me?
I remember being like, seriously, Eric, like, first of all, I'm not a singer at all. I have really good pitch recognition, and yet I can't sing in tune at all. And I just have no at all premise to understand why you would want this on the record. I'm like, It was just an idea. And I remember you saying, no, Josh, I really think you should keep it. And I remember just processing that for a while and remembering that really the powerful bond between us musically was the mutual respect that we had for each other. Mm-hmm. And we were very careful through this process of when to assert a decision. We were very, very, very intentional about that. But you said, no, Josh, I really think you should keep it. And I remember thinking, really? How about a little bit of auto-tune there, Eric? And you said, no,
I've never
perfect.
said no so hard.
Yeah, you were like...
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
No, Josh, it's perfect. I'm like, okay. And I processed that for a long time and just trusted you. And then it hit me weeks or months later that it's so powerful because my daughter, Harper, wants a dad that sings her a lullaby. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want a perfect in-tune sound with the best tone. She wants a dad that sings her a lullaby. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so glad it's there because it's a reminder to me that I try to seek excellence in my craft. When I'm on a stage playing for people, it's an honor. But at the same time, that's a lot of pressure to live under. And I never want to take that pressure home. When I'm at home, Harper wants a dad.
I feel like when you listen to this 10 years from now, and goes along with my ethos of sort of like, you will remember humming that into your phone. That moment when Harper was 2 years old, then you wrote this, and you will remember that. And that is a better... In making music, we can leave little gifts for ourselves to experience, and that can take us right back to where we were when we did that. And if we redo it too much, or if it's perfect, it gets lost.
When I was younger, I would play music thinking that it helped me forget and helped listeners to forget their hardships, their toils. And I thought, okay, this is a great place to be. And then as I've aged, I'm ripe old age of 40 now, I've realized actually music doesn't help us forget. It actually helps us remember. It's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
It helps us to remember the things we need to remember, which is remembering when my little girl was 2 years old, wanting a dad to sing her a lullaby.
I remember I asked my wife to take a listen to the album once it was at a point which I was ready to share. And she picked up on this idea right away of a journey through. She said, oh, it feels like you start here and then you move through to get to this point at the end. I'll give all credit to her. It was her idea to incorporate a map in the art of the album. Something, again, harkening back to our experience doing video game work, or reading great fantasy books where you open the map and you see this journey. In order to get a really great visual for that, I knew almost immediately who I wanted to work with on that. His name is Will Morris Julian. He is an artist based in Wales. He's a video game developer, an incredible artist. And I had worked with him in the past and had been just kind of blown away by his pencil artistry, all hand-drawn. But what I loved about his work is that it was connected with the kind of music we were making because it's minimal but detailed. You know, it is strikingly, it's sparse, but as you look deeper into it, you see all the detail.
Yeah, like if you look at like the trees, every single tree is a slightly different shape, and I'm just like, this had to have taken hours.
Yeah, he's a great artist, and I as soon as we reached out to him, he was open to doing it. We're incredibly fortunate, I think.
So one thing I really like about it is that it is desaturated. It allows the listener to imagine the world they want to be in. And I think that's so important for rest music as our mind decompresses, to allow the listener to go where their mind needs at that time.
It's an invitation.
Yeah, I remember I would like make these voice memos and send them to you, and you'd be like, yeah, Josh, that's really cool. I love it. Can you make it a little less cinematic?
Yeah, like put less in it. Put less. Again, that editing process. And it's funny when you're in the moment and in that back and forth. What was always nice is I think that we would do things and feel comfortable to be like, that's not it.
Yeah.
That's not it. That's nice, but that's not it. Then you were writing these really simple, really small pieces. And then I got to respond to those pieces. And that is what, that was the key that unlocked the door into what we were actually going to do here.
In a way, I kind of like started making just the framework of the piece. And I would add some decorations to that framework. I remember that there would be like some effects processing and kind of like leading you into my vision for what I wanted this track to actually end up with. But I didn't like write any like mixing notes or any kind of notes. I was just like, I don't want to get in the way of the way Eric hears this.
And then I got to get in there and deconstruct it and maneuver it around and not make something completely new, but just it allowed me to do a lot of that that sort of processing and the sort of extra layer of composition that brings it into the specific sound world that it now exists in.
I also knew that you have a way of, when you're creating these ambient textures, any little sniffle in the microphone, any little flutter of the feet.
The sound of breathing I'm obsessed with.
Yeah, you're going to take that, manipulate it, and make it into music.
Yeah, there's many times where some sort of texture of you breathing, because you're really miking up an instrument and it really is just raw sound, or a creaking of the wood in the instrument or something like that. I'd go and just get it like, oh yeah, we're gonna turn that into a pad. That's gonna be a whole thing, you know. that's gonna be the new focus of this whole thing. And you know, again, it speaks to I appreciate the level of trust